Welcome to Whiskey Lore, The Interviews. I'm your host, Drew Hanish, the best-selling author of Whiskey Lore's Travel Guide to Experiencing Kentucky Bourbon and Experiencing Irish Whiskey, and the brand new historical epic, The Lost History of Tennessee Whiskey. And today, we are going to dive into the subject that I covered in the book a little bit here and there, moonshining, more from a Tennessee perspective. But today, we are going to jump into Kentucky and get some insights on moonshining history from someone who actually experienced and had family members that he learned from learning about moonshining. It is Arlen A.J. Jones, the founder of Casey Jones Distillery, along with his wife Peg. And AJ has got lots of stories to tell. I've been out to the distillery a couple of times, and boy, it has changed a lot over 4 years. So we're going to talk about that, as well as talking about his Total Eclipse moonshine and so much more right here. So AJ, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Drew. I appreciate it very much.
Yeah, it was fun coming out and seeing the evolution of the distillery, because when I first showed up 4 years ago for my exploring for my Experiencing Kentucky Bourbon book, it was like you guys were bottling your whiskey in the same spot. You had some barrels stored and you're kind of cramped there in the
Yeah.
corner doing all the work. Now
Little
you got a big,
space. Yeah.
yes, now you got this big warehouse, and then you got a dedicated facility for your distillery. So you guys have come a long way.
Yeah, we started in 22, a $2 million expansion with Rick House and new stills and production space, bottling line, the whole works. So
The whole shooting match, yeah.
whole shooting match now.
Well, we'd love to start off with talking history here, and you got lots of history in what you're, not only from you, but going back to your grandfather, who the distillery is named after. So let's talk about Casey just a bit here. Now, he was known for both creating stills and also making moonshine. Which of those came first for him?
Oh, making the stills came first. Yeah,
Did it?
absolutely did. Yeah.
How did
Yeah,
he get?
my understanding and what I heard from my dad as well. And Granddad never did talk about it a lot because he got in a lot of trouble for all that stuff. So he's kind of quiet about it. But first still he ever built, he never actually used one. He just knew how they worked and built his still. And it's the same still we use today. So same type,
Square, very
Yeah.
unique. Yeah, when I first saw it, I was like, okay, I've been to Scotland, I've been to Ireland, I've been across the U.S. Never have seen a square still anywhere. So how did he decide on square as his shape?
So Casey is a young man. He worked for a coffin maker. So if you look at one we have is kind of a rectangle. And if you look at it really close, it could resemble a coffin. So he knew that the sturdiness of the shape and the size, and then also that if it didn't make it so deep, it would heat up quicker. And so he made it more flat and spread out so they could build a fire all the way across it, and it would actually heat up quicker. His line arm, the way it slopes backwards, actually makes the product come backwards and redistill. So it kind of works a lot like a hybrid column, where you're redistilling the product so that it brings up the proof.
Yeah.
And then the biggest thing was his condenser. That was one of the biggest things about him too. Everybody's using a copper worm, and he decided that he could make a jacketed wall canister that the alcohol vapors would lie between these layers of copper, and he'd have more cooling surface. And so he invented a condenser, condensers are used nowadays in just about every still there is. So, it kind of a great creation.
Yeah.
We use it, we use it in all of our stills. Even their new stills have condensers. So kind of cool.
Yeah,
to be one of the first to do that.
Had he, how do you get inspired to do that? Was that really kind of him just creating on his own and coming up with something? Were there, I've never looked into the history of condensers and when they actually shifted to using condensers.
I'm not sure exactly either. I know that he played a big role in this part of the country using condensers. Um, as far as at least the illegal stuff going. I don't know about the modern stills when they do it, but that is a good topic. I might have to look up myself and do a little research on to see.
Yeah, yeah.
But I do know he was known for the square pot still, and then he spent a couple of times in the pen for making and got caught, and his style and design kind of spread after those times. We called the place he went to Moonshine University, basically. They had all those moonshiners in there, and they're all learning from each other. And so next thing you know, there's square steel showing up everywhere. So yeah,
So he was kind
yeah,
of holding court as professor himself and
yeah,
getting people interested in that kind of still making.
yes, certainly was. And the
Did you?
stills were easy to pack. That's the thing. They had handles on them. They come apart in three pieces. So two guys could pick up a still and move it into the woods and set it up and run it, bring it back out, never leave it where it was, because if they did, most of the time they'd lose it. So, um, you know, either the government would catch it or find it and cut it up, or somebody would steal it. That happened a lot in Land Between the Lakes area. So,
Yeah, it was
um,
interesting researching the history and hearing the stories of old moonshiners because there was a real shift from the original moonshiners after the excise law came about, where most of them it was kind of like they had to they didn't necessarily hide their stills because they didn't think they were doing anything wrong
right.
initially, but then it started to turned into a little moonshine war out there where the revenuers were chasing them down. Then they got crafty and started hiding them in different places. But you really couldn't move the thing around very quickly until all of a sudden the automobile came along and you had trucks. And I have to say, the first time I saw that square still, I thought, well, that'd be probably pretty easy to throw on a flatbed truck and just take it somewhere.
Oh, it was easy. It was made to fit in the back of a Model A pickup, and you could haul it, and it was made to fit back there. The
Yeah.
flatbed we have is even more room, but like I say, it come apart in three pieces, so they could throw a blanket over the top of it, and it was low profile, so it was kind of down below the sides of the truck. So it basically is hidden in it. So yeah, and that was part of the design and part of the use is being able to move it. So, there's some people call it a coffin still, some people call it a wagon bed, and some people, just call it a square pot. So about three names that I know people call that thing. So
Yeah.
um, I call it a piece of art. So yeah,
It displays very nicely in two different locations. You actually have his original still sitting over your bar, which I think is
I,
fun.
I do. And actually, the story behind that is Peg, my wife was through, she was on the Board of Regents at Murray State. So she's coming back and forth a lot from Murray. And she decided to stop into the visitor center one day at Land Between the Lakes, and she noticed the still was gone. And of course, ever since we've been together, she knew about Casey's still. And so the forestry department had took over operations of Land Between the Lakes. They took over from the TVA. And when they switched out, they redid the visitor center, and there really wasn't much about the moonshining era. They left just a little bit of history in there of Casey and one of his small miniature stills in there, but they took out all the big display. And so she asked where it went, what happened to it? Because I grew up with it from a child all the way up. It'd been there since 1967.
Mm.
And so eventually we found out. Eventually we worked with one of the guys that worked there that was in charge. And it took about a year, but we actually got them to give that still back to us so that it wouldn't disappear and get destroyed or somebody steal it for the copper, which that was kind of neat. That's what started the chain reaction of this distillery is I always say, what's a guy going to do when a guy gets the still? He's going to make moonshine. So yeah, so it's a couple of years after we got it, but yeah, I couldn't stand it much longer. So
Well, it's a fun
started.
story too, the how that still got there because that was a still that Casey actually made himself for the government that had tracked him down a couple of times and put
Yeah.
him in prison for that.
Yeah. First legal still he ever made, and they actually commissioned him to build that for the visitor center because the reason why they did it was they had a lot of history in there about Casey. They had all this stuff printed and everything, and signage, and um, but the still they had in there wasn't Casey's, and so Casey demanded that they take his name off of it, and so they came back and worked out an agreement. If he built a still for them, then that would solve the problem. So he built a still for them, and he built that in 1967. So it's kind of neat. I was around, you know, Casey from the time I was probably, well, actually, the time I was born, I was around Casey quite a bit, all the way up to like the seventh grade. He actually lived with us several times throughout that time period on the same property. So I was around with him when he was making the miniature stills. I wasn't around the time he made that one though, but I knew about it. Knew about it
Yeah.
very well. Used to take field trips in school, to visitor center at Land Between Lakes. I was so proud, my grandfather had built this still. I could brag about it, and all that stuff. So yeah, it's kind of neat. It's kind of sad the forestry department changed that out, but in a way it helped us become a distillery. So it worked out
Yeah.
really well. And I'm telling you, a little bit earlier about the forestry department was here yesterday. About 5 of them came up and wanted to visit with Casey Jones Distillery and talk about some things about getting the moonshine stuff back into the visitor center and
Nice.
doing some stuff with some demonstrations and all that stuff again about the history. So it was nice to hear that come back, and so forth. So
It's
trying to get me to build them a still. So how
well,
neat
it's
would that be?
that would be awesome, and it's one of those things that, you kinda learn through the history of whiskey. A lot of families and, you talking about Casey and that he didn't really talk that much about his past.
Mm,
This ebb and flow of, whiskey is in, whiskey is out, whiskey is in, whiskey is out, and it's like, a lot. This is my trouble with doing research. A lot of times is that families kind of buried that information about their either moonshining history or their uh, history in the whiskey industry, even if they were a big distillery. And so it's fun to see this come back. I think this is part of the reason why I really embrace this idea of telling the history and the people side of it, because I think if we can get to those stories and we can show how ingrained it was in just how we evolved as people and how it helped us survive in some cases, that and
yeah,
that it's filled with stories that will keep us from that ebb and flow, and we can keep these stories alive.
yeah. It was a way of life for most of them that were doing that. They needed the income. Not like today where you can take a load of grain to the market so easy. They couldn't do that. So the easiest thing to do was turn it into what we call liquid corn, and they could transport that so much better to the market and get so much more money out of it than they could with just the straight corn. So they added value to it, by distilling and bottling and so forth. So it did go all over. I was talking about how neat it would be. Casey built that still for the federal government in 1967. And now the federal government's asking me to build them a still. That's kind of neat.
It is.
I hope I can find the time to do it. That's going to be the trick. Pretty busy operation right now.
Yeah,
But
and this
when
is
I
I
built
was
the
gonna say
still that we use today, that was just all kinds of rewards to me personally to be able to do that. And the first time we fired that thing up, that I built and it ran like it was supposed to and didn't leak. And I said it was almost more exciting than it was when my second child was born. I'll say first child sometimes. It's second
Yeah.
child's around. Yeah,
Nice.
yeah.
Um, how did you learn to build stills? Did Casey show you how, or did it come through your father, or
No, I grew up. My dad had a construction company, so I grew up in construction. We always said we were part Amish or Mennonite because we worked as kids. From the time we was big enough to pack one shingle or one brick. So I grew up in construction. I grew up around, my dad had license, he was a licensed plumber. Casey could solder, copper, just anything. So I grew up around doing that portion of plumbing and soldering copper. So I knew how to do that portion, but to build a still was completely a different deal. So measured closely to the one that we have that he built, the last one he built, and kind of went from there and just looked at the techniques of how he did it and tried to follow those same techniques. And I don't know. I say a lot of times this is how it really felt to me. I'd go to sleep at night, and in my dreams I'd figure out how to do this the next day, and I would go do that and work. I always said Casey was talking to me. He was telling me what to do in my sleep. So
Nice.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it didn't
Did
have much experimenting that I had to do. It was just like it came together. I mean, it was kind of pretty amazing to me.
do you kind of subscribe to, if you go to Scotland and you look at their pot stills, when they replace a pot still, if it has a ding in the side of it, they put that same ding into the new one because they think that's enough to change the flavor of what they're producing. Do you think did you ever do any experiments where you had the two stills both running to see if they tasted any different?
I've had both running, and they both work exactly the same. They actually do. That's still if we get real good fermentation on our mash, and we're putting back our heads and tails in to redistill, it'll produce a gallon in 3.5 minutes, and that's what the old still would do as well. So everything's got to be perfect for it to do that, but it happens. It happens quite a bit. So the new grandfather still we have now down below that we had built, which is a commercial grade square pot still. There's a little difference there in operation, but it's still great. I'm still able to produce the same flavorful product. And if I try to run that same product through that great big hybrid still, I've never been able to reproduce the same taste. I've never been able to mash 1,000 gallons at a time and get the same output from it that I get from doing it in 55-gallon drums, like we
Yeah.
always did. So I even impressed my fermentation guy that works for me. He just couldn't believe the difference that it made, trying to do it 1,000-gallon versus trying to do it in a 55-gallon drum. So yeah, kind of neat. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, in those old days, when your grandfather was distilling, because I've been getting really into the origins of bourbon and, of course, Tennessee whiskey as well with the book. And as I've been doing that, I've been reading a lot of these old techniques of keeping multiple barrels around where you're letting it naturally ferment in smaller barrels rather than in big vessels, and the difference that that makes in making the whiskey, and not using yeast, commercial yeast, but instead just putting the back set in and then kind of letting nature take its course.
Of
Are
course.
these things you have tried to do? Are you doing it that way, or
We've tried to do where we actually don't use any yeast. The yield's just not there that we need to have for it. So it's a combination. We do use the back set, and we do use fresh yeast as well. Um, the thing about it is the yeast that you have in the back set, the fresh yeast is going to kind of like take over because it's the majority of what's in there. It's going to take over, and it's going to create different flavors. So that's part of the reason with the small batches, like the still that we have that we've used for 8 years that I built. It would hold 3 of the 55-gallon drums of mash in it. So between the 3 drums, you get a little bit different flavor profile in each one of them. Sometimes you get a lot of apple taste, from the yeast and so forth. Other times you wouldn't. Um, so I think blending those together into one batch is what creates a lot of the unique flavors that we have and so forth. So,
okay?
and we did have a family recipe to start out with. So yeah, we kind of made it our recipe over time, but yeah, we had
Nice.
something to start with.
Well, this is
Yeah.
the tough part about, trying to bring forward a tradition when back then maybe they were using the same grains each time, or maybe they weren't. I mean, did you ever hear any thoughts from Casey on what kind of grains he was using, or was it always the same recipe?
It was always, I think, pretty well the yellow corn because that worked the best for them. And they had it themselves that they grew, but they also were able to get that. And a lot of the corn came from W.F. Ware, which is a place over in Trenton. I know my granddad got corn from there. I've gotten corn from there over time. Different people own it, but it's come from the same place, and it's Kentucky grown or Tennessee. Most of ours, I know, is all Kentucky, but then, they were getting stuff across the Tennessee line down in southern part of Land Between the Lakes as well, and then from the Clarksville area. So a lot of times taking moonshine, bringing back corn,
Yeah.
Same thing with cane. A lot of sugar use, so, take some and trade for sugar to make more batches with, So that's how
Yeah.
that works.
Yeah. Well, that brings up the other question of where are the markets back then? How was he getting his whiskey or his moonshine sold? Was he using bootleggers to do it, or did he have his own little network going?
So Casey was kind of a little bit different than some of the others, but he had a couple of bootleggers that would run for him as well, some family members. But Casey, actually, his real name was Alfred, not Casey. And
Mm,
Casey was a nickname for him. And the reason why he got that, he didn't deal with the individuals. He dealt with what he considered to be kind of a middleman. He only sold his product by the case.
mm.
So you didn't go buy an individual bottle from him or anything like that. You had to buy a case. And so over time, people talked about that guy that only would sell his stuff by the case, kind of developed a reputation of that. And so the nickname Casey started, and it just stayed with him and um, kept it, all the way up till he died. Everybody would call him Casey, but it wasn't his real name. His real name was Alfred. So kind of funny, that something like that would happen.
Yeah.
Um,
It was an
yeah,
age of nicknames, though. As I go through and I start reading on some of these people, there's a guy I follow out of Bourbon County who went by the name Casher Dan. And they called him Casher Dan because he always wanted cash. He never wanted no credit. We're not doing anything else. We're not doing trade.
yeah,
I want cash.
cash right now up front. Yeah, yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah, which was
yeah,
a tough thing back in those early days because cash wasn't always available. There was a lot of
no,
bartering going on.
yeah. There was a lot of sugar flown into this area for making moonshine. There's a gentleman down at Katie's that his family owns a lot of, not Katie's, but Eddyville, Kentucky.
Hmm.
They own a lot of land down there. And the way they got that land was his grandfather used to fly sugar in and he traded it for land.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, he traded it for land. So he wound up with thousands of acres adjoining land between the lakes. So he owns thousands of acres down there, and that's how that happened. So it's kind of neat. Those stories like that are kind of neat as well. Um,
It
but
does
yeah,
take you back to a different time because
oh
again,
yeah,
we think of modern commerce and going to the bank, and back then they were passing around a lot of promissory notes, and you know, I have stories of people who, left in their will basically a bond that they had been given by somebody to say, I will pay you, for this down the road, or you can trade this bond to somebody else like it's money, because they didn't have a bank. So they had to figure out some way to trade money back and forth.
yeah, yeah. That's it. You know, uh, Back to the stills for just a minute because this is kind of neat for me. This was a neat experience as well. When we decided to do our expansion, we had in mind a hybrid column still because we wanted to produce a lot of bourbon. We were going to maybe do something about a square pot down the road. And after we got the big still ordered and that was coming, we started deciding, well, we need to get a square pot because we need to get a custom one that will work with steam. And I just don't have the ability to build one that way. So the company we used, which was specific out of Canada to build our other stills, we talked to them about building a square pot. I drew up the design and sent it to them, and their engineers worked on it, and they came back with a quote on it, and we were going to do it. And then they said, well, it's going to take us 2 years to get this done. Oh, come on now, 2 years. And that's just I wouldn't commit to it, because it was going to take so long. I said, we'll do something different. We'll see what we can do somewhere else. And at any rate, they kept calling me. And one day the salesperson called me. This is like 1st of July. And he says, there's a big distilling conference in Missouri this year, the American Distilling Conference. And our company, our owner, and our guys that work out there and our engineers, we have never built a square still. Everybody wants to build that still. If you'll commit to that still, we want to have that for that conference at the end of September. This was 1st of July. At the end of September, we want to display that square still there as a custom build job. And if you'll commit, we'll have it. We'll do it, and we'll deliver it to you right after the conference, straight to you. I said, okay. And lo and behold, they did. And, the first time I saw it was at that conference. Walk in, showcase, show floor, all these distillery products and all these things. And out in the middle of it stands a grandfather still. They actually named it the grandfather.
Wow.
And it really did great justice to us on it. The advertising did a story or two. They did a video, all that stuff. And it was kind of cool. And then they delivered it to us the same week we got our big still in. So
wow,
that was kind of amazing to me, to get that. And of course, that thing purrs like a kitten, really.
I guess there's some breaking in time. You just got to kind of get to know and get a feel for a still life. But your advantage is you're making moonshine on that thing. So it's like you can sort of tell right away. You don't have to wait for 4 years to figure out whether it's working or not.
But we are doing second run bourbon through it too.
Are you? Okay.
So yeah, we'll run bourbon through it again sometimes and create a different flavor profile by rerunning that bourbon. So we have barrels that we put up that way as well. So every now and then we'll just decide to rerun some, and that's what we'll do, rerun it. So yeah.
As I think about that square still, I just think about how reflux happens, and then you have this spirit that is in the corners. And what does that? But you're heating consistent across the bottom of the entire still. Is that correct?
Once you start heating, there's movement going on inside that still. It's just like boiling water, once you heating it, it's moving. So it's not sitting still. It's not being mixed like it is in the big hybrid still. And you don't want to throw a bunch of corn in there. You want to separate it. And that's the reason why we'll run it through the hybrid still first, or we'll strain it like we do when we do our moonshine. We have a strain system that we pump out the liquid and leave the corn in the drums and reuse that corn again. So
okay. So you're not doing on grain distilling with the moonshine.
No,
am I understanding that? Okay.
Yeah.
You're just distilling the liquid.
Just the liquid, yes.
Okay. Is that a way that Casey used to do it in the bigger fire run still?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Same kind of way. Separate out the liquid. I can tell you, I know when I first started doing this experiment with it, I've got a drum of corn and liquid in there all mixed up, and we did it by hand with paddles and mixing it and the sugar, the corn. And then we would take a scoop and dip out the liquid, turn the barrels on the side, get all the liquid out you can, and then distill the liquid and leave the rest of it in there. So that's how we started. Of course, eventually we got a pump that we could actually, with strainer on the end, and we could actually strain out the liquid. And we still do that today, even with the new grandfather. So when it comes to the moonshine side of things.
Yeah.
The bourbon, the corn is ground a little bit harsher, a little bit more, so it's a little bit harder to strain. So you can pull the liquid off and leave what's in the corn, but you're not going to gain as much. So we run it through the hybrid still, which has a mixer, mixing the corn and all, and keep it from scorching, and it works just fine. Yeah.
Okay. This is one of those things that as I've been bumping through some of this old history, I find that there was someone who mentioned in one of the articles I was reading, and this article is from like 1870, 1880, somewhere around then. And they were going, we really kind of miss that scorched flavor we used to get out of our whiskey. They were reminiscing on the pleasure of that's what it, you know,
Scorch.
that's what said old whiskey to us. Old fashioned
Yeah.
whiskey was it had that fire scorch of the grain. And so it's interesting to see because I would say predominantly everybody's distilling on grain these days, but you have those that are going the other route, and it's just one of those things to kind of pay attention to when you're doing these distillery tours and
Mhm.
hearing, you know, all of a sudden on grain kind of has a meaning. And
Yeah.
when you think about those old fire stills and how they had to clean those stills out if they scorched the corn on the bottom of the still, a lot of extra work to do that, and plus that extra little bit of flavor that we
We
might
did that
think
in the
is
beginning. Yeah.
yeah,
With
that
that
we
new
might think
still.
is that we think is annoying, but apparently somebody liked that taste because it was it brought back
Well,
memories.
if you think about it, I mean, you had a fried bologna sandwich.
Yes,
Some
yeah,
people like their bologna sandwich fried. They like it burnt,
yeah, yeah.
and they like that taste of it. And some people don't like it burnt. They don't want it burnt at all. So I'm a burnt bologna guy.
Yeah, I like my eggs slightly not burnt, but I mean, really brown. And I remember the first time I was cooking eggs for someone, and they looked and they went, "Are you gonna stop cooking those?" I'm like, "No, I like them, you know, to to have a little bit of. They should be brown to me. They shouldn't be yellow and white. I like the brown for some reason.
Brown.
So, yeah."
Yeah. Yeah, well, like I
um,
say, with that hybrid still, first few times we used it, we scorched some of the corn in the bottom of that. So we had to do some cleaning out, learning how to operate that thing, too much steam on it. So just
your
trial and error.
hybrid your hybrid still is very interesting too, in that usually I tend to see the column head on top of the
Uh-huh.
pot, and your column head is actually to the side. What was
Yeah.
the reasoning behind that?
I liked it that way. Part of it had to do with height in our building, how tall our building was. But I like it that way because it's easier to get to it, the column, and work on it than it is when you have to get over top of your pot still to get to it. So it is much easier to work on it where it is. And I actually like the way it operates better. So I did a little research about it whenever I was talking about it, and talked to the people that made it quite a bit. And the things that I wanted to know, they were able to answer. And so that's the reason why we came up with it off to the side. Um, Works great. I love the way it works. So pretty simple. Once we got started with it, once we figured it out, it was great. So
Yeah.
yeah,
What if you're trying to run it as a pot still? What happens once it gets to the column head, or do you bypass the column head?
you can bypass it. We have valves at the top. We can bypass the
Yeah.
column and go straight as a pot still. And that's sometimes as a stripping run. That's what we'll do where
Hmm.
we want to rerun it through the square pot. We'll do it that way. And we've actually done a few runs for other people that just did stripping runs. So we bypassed the column and so forth.
Okay.
Yeah.
So talk about this transition from because you actually did do some moonshining yourself, as I understand, before you
Yeah.
got into the. Yeah, this is where we get into that part where sometimes when I'll talk to people online about it on a video, they're kind of like, well, yeah, sort of, you know, and they're like, statute of limitations is run out. You're fine
Yeah. Yeah.
now.
Probably has. It's run out by now. But the thing about it is, back playing around with it and all that stuff, I wasn't selling or anything like that. And there's a lot of people making moonshine now that if they're not selling, they don't bother them. People are doing it at home, even though it's not still legal. Some states it's legal by the state, but still not legal by the federal anywhere.
Hmm.
But they don't bother them unless they're out selling it. And that's because they're avoiding the taxes when they sell it like that. You talking about taxes? I always say that my granddad didn't pay his taxes on it. My dad didn't pay his taxes on it. the federal government figured out how I could pay all that back. So I get to pay enough taxes to take care of all that, I believe.
Nice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
The tax system back in the 1870s was so screwy that they were paying a little tax for everything. They had to pay tax on the barrel, they had to pay tax on stamps, they had to pay tax on they had to pay for the storekeepers and gaugers that were manning
Yep,
their distilleries, and
yep. Hmm.
it got to a
Furnish them a
point.
place to live and all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and it basically brought the whole entire industry almost to a halt in 1870 because they were almost basically outlawing the way that people had made whiskey for years, and coming up with their own set of rules. So the government sometimes comes in and thinks they know how to tell the distiller, what they need to do, but it's not always advantageous.
Well, they did pass back a few years ago and lowered the tax on bourbon whiskey from like, what was it, $13 something to $2.70 something like that cents. So
Yeah,
there's quite a bit of reduction on it that make it a difference. Otherwise, I don't know if the craft distilleries could survive if they kept it that way.
yeah.
I know we would have had a hard time if it stayed that way. Just too much of it going out in taxes. And
It's
you said there's state tax, federal tax, there's barrel tax, there's tax everywhere on it
yeah.
and so forth. Yeah.
I was reading in the Old Crow. Somebody was giving a deposition in an Old Crow trial in 1907, and it was an old timer, and um, they asked him a question about the quality of Old Crow, and he said, "Well, I used to be able to get it really cheap." And they're like, "Oh, so it wasn't fine, refined whiskey?" He said, "No, it's when the excise law came along." He said, "Before that, you could get it cheap, but then all the taxes got thrown on top of it, and it got expensive. And as I was doing my research through old newspapers, you could get it at 15 cents a gallon in 1860 for whiskey, but then
Wow.
it was $2 a gallon by 1865. So that's the difference. It went from 15 cents to $2 in that short of a period of
Sure.
time."
Right. Yeah. Inflation, right?
Yeah, that's
We're all
major.
ex- we're all experiencing inflation now. So
Yeah,
yeah.
they call that a sin tax, I think is what that was
Yeah.
by a big stretch.
Yeah.
Um, so talk about this advance from where you were distilling before to where you're at now. I mean, like I say, when I was there initially, you were actually distilling on your homemade
Hmm.
square still.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
So
that's the still we used for probably the first 7 years of our production. So on that, like say, if you did do any kind of bourbon, you had to strain it out first before you could do it. So it was liquid only still. Um, but we would run. I mean, we had times like, I hope we're going to talk about the Eclipse soon, but in 2017 we were running that thing around the clock, and we were running it, twice a day and 7 days a week to make Total Eclipse Moonshine, which we had trademarked for the Eclipse. Um, so we can really put out a lot of product, and it just depends on how often you run it. But we usually ran it 5 days a week, and so we would make probably equivalent of maybe 2 barrels a week that we could put up of aged product, and still have some for our clear product that we sold. So now with the new stills, we're putting up about 3 barrels a day of
mm,
product, and still able to make all the moonshine that we want to make as well, which we can make a ton of it with the new stills. So it's quite a bit of difference,
yeah,
They with the Rick House and putting up barrels. I think we put up close to 600 barrels last year, um, and weren't running full blast. So,
yeah. And now you
yeah.
have a bottling line, and you even have
Oh
cows
yeah.
outside your. Do those cows get any of your spent mash?
No, the neighbor over here, he's not much into the spent mash, but you go down the road about 3.5 miles, there's a big cattle operation, They come and pick it up twice a week from us, and we don't have any issues as far as getting rid of the spent grain. And his cows love it. He describes it as crack cocaine for the cows. What he says. They love it. So
Yeah.
yeah,
So it's nice
yeah.
to see you all spread out though now with a big bottling line, and
hmm
you've got a I love the name. Is it a hammer mill or is it a roller mill? You got the
It's a roller
Sasquatch.
mill. We use a roller
Okay.
mill, and it's called the Sasquatch. Yeah, I love the name of it too.
That's not.
It does its job on grinding that corn.
Yeah,
Uh,
I thought
so we
hammer
did,
because it's Bigfoot.
yeah. So we did try to, when we put the operation in, make it as simple to run as we possibly could. So basically, just two guys can run the mashing and the distilling operation, and even fill some barrels. And then it really only takes one person to run that bottling line for a barrel. If you want to run 2 or 3 barrels to it, then we usually have 3 or 4 people on it. So
Okay.
it's made a difference in what we bottle, and we do some contract distilling for other people now, and we also do bottling for other people. We have a couple other smaller distilleries that we furnish product to, besides putting barrels out on the market with Barrel Global. Barrel Global has several of our barrels out there, and we're doing some contract for them right now. So it's made a change in our operation altogether as far as where we stand, and that was the goal, was to quit playing around with it, and become something in the distillery business. So growing our
Yeah.
name, distribution, got the Total Eclipse Moonshine and Bourbon this year for the event coming up in 2024. And then we also have a special bottle of the barrel aged shine that we put up during the eclipse in 2017. And so that's been aging. It's been in the dark ever since then. And can I show you that bottle?
Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
So this is it right here.
Very
Um,
nice.
so this has been aging ever since 2017, and this is a special release that's only available here in the gift shop. So, and that'll
Okay.
be released on the 6th, which is the weekend of the eclipse.
So
So
you have a big viewing party out there?
we will. It won't be anything like it was in 2017, where we had 6,000 people here the day of the eclipse. We're not on the center line. We're about 99.69% totality. So if you go
Okay.
a little further north, Paducah, they're 100%. So it makes a difference when you come to wanting people to come. If we were in the 100%, we had a lot of people that wanted to come back from
Mm,
2017, and they still may come. They still may come here. I know they'll visit.
yeah.
Um,
I got
and
lucky.
then we also
I was gonna
did
say,
these too. Yeah, the Total Eclipse Moonshine and Bourbon. So this is a 4 grain bourbon. Great drink.
very nice. We'll
Yep.
jump through and do a tasting on those here in just a moment. Um,
Okay.
in terms of your I mean, the eclipse is definitely something to see. It is definitely an event because I'm in South
Oh yeah.
Carolina, and the last one came right over us, so we were right almost in the path as well. And I think even if you're off by a little bit, it's still an amazing
Yeah. Oh
event.
yeah. It's going to be. Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
for us, we've seen a full. Now we're kind of going to see a partial.
yeah,
And a pretty big partial. So, um, but that Eclipse event was. I mean, it was a once in a lifetime thing for us. And with the amount of people we had here, we had 850 campers here. From tents all the way up to the big fancy campers.
yeah.
We had a music festival. We started music Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday night. Then the Eclipse was on Monday. We had hot air balloon rides Saturday night, Sunday night. We had about 12,000 people through the distillery in a week. Um,
Mm,
we had Greyhound buses come in from Indiana. We had 5 of those come in that had planned for, and we had space for them to park for people to see the eclipse. And that I got up. I got up the morning of the eclipse, and those buses were here. They had came in during the night. We had people watching the gates and letting people come in all night long. And anyway, they came in, I think, at like 4 o'clock in the morning. because they were afraid traffic, get here.
Yeah.
And so as soon as it got daylight, they let all those people off those buses. I got up at 6 o'clock to come down here to get ready. There was people everywhere. Where did these people come from? Nobody slept last night. And then I saw the buses and realized that the buses had gotten there.
Wow.
But yeah, it was crazy. A lot of people from all over the world, and there were no issues. It was great. It was fascinating to meet all those people, and it's great to sell that much product. That's kind of, I always describe it as the part of the Kickstarter to Casey Jones Distillery.
Very
It
nice.
jumped us to another level, at the distillery. So
That's great. Well, and
yeah.
so now you've trademarked the name Total Eclipse. So this is your brand going forward. It
Yeah.
appears. Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
we actually, we trademarked it, and 2 years before the Eclipse,
did
and
you so,
actually released it
so
in 2015.
back then? Did you know that there was another one coming through at 2024? Because it seems that
Yeah,
this was planned out that you were gonna age this moonshine for 7 years.
yeah, it was. We did, and we had people that came sign the barrels while they were here from the Eclipse. So a lot of people signed the barrels and so forth. It got pretty crowded, and not everybody got to that was here, but a lot of people did.
Yeah.
So yeah, we did. We planned it for that. I wasn't sure if I'd be around by. It seemed like a really long time when 2017. You're talking about 2024.
Yeah.
It seemed like a long time, but it 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 pays to plan. It really does pay to plan. So
Yeah.
that's what we did. We trademarked it, and actually, we hired a company to rebrand us after the Eclipse to help get our labels to where they need to be, and
Mhm.
our overall look of everything, from merchandise to everything. And they really didn't want to do the Total Eclipse. They said, "Oh, that's done. That's past. You won't sell that." And that's one of our featured products,
Yeah.
And so finally they came along with it and did it, and we've sold it ever since. It's our number one selling moonshine.
Nice.
Uh, so yeah,
Well, I have some
yeah.
in my glass, and
Uh-oh.
as I was doing a read on the information I was sent, it says this is a relaunch. So, what moonshine have you been selling in between? Have you just been doing flavored moonshines in between, or?
We have actually had a Total Eclipse moonshine different label
Mhm.
ever since the Eclipse or ever since 2015. Um, we've gone through one, two, we're on our third label for Total Eclipse.
Okay.
This label will stay. This label represents 17 and 24 together on it. It shows the big X on the United States where they both crossed at, which is not very far from here. Um, we do another version. We do a couple other versions. We do a 92 proof, which is what we originally started with. And originally, I'd heard Dad talk about Casey liking to have his proof down in the 90s, so that's why we
Mm.
come up with the 92 proof. Then we came out with the 100 proof, 100% totality for the 100 proof Total Eclipse moonshine. Stuck with it, and then we have a still proof, which is 118 proof that
Okay.
we sell. Very popular. We sell it in a 1.75 liter jug.
Okay. You are
Yeah,
going old school with the jug.
yeah, we do. We also sell what we call Casey Select in a 1.75 liter jug too. So
Oh, very
half
nice.
gallon jug basically.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Do
yeah.
you do refills?
we can, but we don't. But we could.
Yeah.
We do a, we do a drink called the Moonarita, and we sell a lot of Moonarita kits, which we have a jug that has the measurements and tells people exactly how to make it, and they get that jug when they buy a kit.
Uh-huh.
And so like the 1.75 liter jug, you can make 4 half gallons of Moonarita with it, and so very popular. We sell a ton of it. We go through a lot of Moonarita jugs that we give away with the kit. So
Yeah. We
yeah,
so often see the mason jar, but it's like the jug is where it's at.
yeah,
You know,
it's
that
where
was
it, Yeah, that's
It's
where it
how,
was.
it's how
Eh,
they weren't carrying mason jars around with them back in the old days. They had those
mm,
because I mean bottles were expensive
yeah,
in those early days. So
yep,
yeah,
yep. I
um,
remember Dad talking about people would bring their jugs back to get refills to buy,
yeah,
because of
yeah,
that. Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
Um,
So,
So you do, I mean,
Carol,
you have one of the most extensive tastings, I think, of any distillery that I've been to because they set me up 10 samples. And I'm that's not usual. Sometimes I go into a place and it's they'll give you 4 samples with a little drip at the bottom of each glass and
yeah.
you're given a wide selection. So if you like moonshine or you like whiskey, you can kind of have your own choice.
Hmm. Yep. We also, like I say, we let them taste what the Moonaritas taste like to make the kit, and that's the reason why we sell a lot of kits.
Yeah.
A
So
lot of kits.
moonshine to me always kind of has a particular nose to it. But yours actually kind of has more of a savory kind of nose to it to me for some reason.
Yeah.
It's really interesting because sometimes it can be overly sweet, or sometimes you get kind of a burnt. I call it the rum effect, where you get kind of a burnt sugar kind of a
Mm,
note in here. But it's hard to put
yeah.
my finger on exactly. Um, where this nose is at. What how do you describe your moonshine?
Well, most of the time, I get a little bit of an apple
Hmm.
with the moonshine. When I smell, that's what I get. Um, maybe a little bit of the caramel from the cane.
Yeah,
Uh, but we try not to strip too much away from the product when you're distilling. The more you distill it, the more flavors you get rid of.
mm,
So we try to keep it safe, but we try to keep flavor there. And you're going to get I think a quite a bit of corn flavor as well
yeah.
to it. So if you don't like corn, you're not going to like the moonshine.
Cit-
But I've never run across anybody that hadn't liked our moonshine.
yeah,
They'll
citrus.
say it's some of the best they've ever had. So
Yeah, the citrus. I get a little citrus. I get a little apple on the, and it's probably coming from power of suggestion as well. But those kind of stand out to me um,
yeah.
on that. And sometimes the thing I have against moonshine is that sometimes it's a little too yeasty because it
Hmm.
hasn't had that time to sit in a barrel. But I don't necessarily get that out of your moonshine. It's
Awesome.
like,
I didn't pay you to say that either, right?
yeah, I mean, there's a overly doughiness. I think I guess would be a better way to explain it on a lot of moonshines, and I don't tend to get that on this one.
Oh, awesome. Awesome.
Very nice. Um,
Yeah.
It says on the side of the bottle distilled and aged. Do you throw this in a barrel at all, or is that
The distilled and aged should be on the barrel cut.
oh, okay?
Moonshine should just be distilled from corn and cane.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah. Now the this one this one is aged, that one I was showing you
that
earlier.
one there, and
That's the
this is
barrel cut.
yeah, and
That's your
let's
moonshine recipe aged in a barrel, new charred oak barrel, just like a bourbon. Um,
and
you,
it threw me at first because when the first things I saw were single barrel, and I thought and I saw the color, and that lent me to think that it was bourbon. So when I first started tasting it, you come with all of the things that you think a
yeah,
bourbon is going to have, and then you start tasting it, and I'm going, "Wow, this is really very different." It's like I always get like vanilla custard on this.
uh,
It's like that sweetness of the corn mixing with the barrel is really kind of enhancing kind of that vanilla and buttery custard kind of
a-
note in there.
yeah. A lot of times we'll get a lot of caramel
Hmm.
notes from it when it's aged like that. There's some barrels that sometimes that when we do some of these batches of things that I will not throw in a batch because it is so good. It's got to be a single barrel,
Yeah, yeah.
um, because
It,
it's just it's done its thing right. Um,
is
the
this a
barrels
number
brought
four?
out some
Is
number four.
is
We
it
have done some number two, but mostly number four char.
Yeah.
I'm not sure we've opened any of our number 2 char that we put up yet. So, but
Did
yeah,
you
number
did you
4.
have any hesitations or worry that, you got 7 years and this is going to be sitting in a warehouse? Did you find you had to baby these in a particular way to make sure that they didn't overcook?
No, I know the first couple of years on this product, it was in the distillery here where you were talking about earlier, where we used to bottle and used to be barreled.
Mm-hmm.
So it didn't get a lot of the different climate change to it. So it didn't age like it would have been if it'd been in a rick house as fast. So I wasn't worried about it. I had tasted other barrels that had been up a pretty good while, but
Mm-hmm.
I actually had never tasted this product until I was on another podcast last week. And they had dumped this bottle, the 7-year stuff, and my grandson had, and Cody, and they had done some video and put it in the bottle and never saved a sample for me because I was out with the flu. And they didn't save me a sample. So I had not tasted that until we got on the podcast. I said, I'm going to save it, and I'll do it with the guys on the podcast and stuff. And um, it was kind of neat to taste it after all that time.
Yeah.
We had never got into that barrel. We'd never touched it. We never tapped into it. We have several
Wow.
like that did.
So
I knew it would be good.
yeah. So this was
I knew.
I mean, that is saying a lot that you had the belief in it enough. Have you aged any moonshines this long before?
No, this is the longest. This is the longest we've aged. I wished I'd have kept some back in the beginning when we first started, but we needed to sell at that time. So we
Yeah.
were selling some of this stuff when it wasn't but a year old, and people were loving it. So, had to sell it, had to go with
Yeah.
it, had to make some
That's
money.
yeah.
Yeah,
It's really nice
yeah,
on the palate, and it makes me think that this should become a thing
yeah,
going on. That you should have
yeah.
these. How long till the next eclipse?
Well, I don't know. I don't think we have one probably in here in our lifetime.
Yeah.
It happens other places,
Yeah.
other countries, but not here.
Yeah.
We actually, there was Eclipse after 2017. I think it was in 19 that we had a bunch of Eclipse glasses left over. We actually sent it to that country for those people to use. We didn't want to keep them till 24,
Yeah.
and so we sent them for them to use, which worked out good. Yeah. So anyway,
What was your experience when you first tasted this and you're live and people are looking at you,
yeah.
wondering what your impression is going to be? What stuck
Um,
out to you?
it was great. The product tasted really good. Um, I actually was surprised a little bit by some of it. Um, uh, it was great. I mean, it
Yeah.
was fun doing it on the podcast. It was fun doing it with the guys doing it on it. Um, I sent them a bottle later so they could taste it later. You actually got one. We sent you one ahead of time,
Yeah.
and have you opened it and
I
tried it?
have. I'm sipping it right now. Really nice.
Are you?
Yeah, like I say, on the nose, the sweetness is there. It's a lot of what you would expect out of the barrel, but there's almost like I get like a cola note out of it. I'm getting that vanilla custard coming out of it. And then what really threw me was when I was tasting it, and maybe this is because I thought it was a bourbon when I first started tasting it. I almost get like a little herbally rye note in it. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
and it's like, where is that coming from?
yeah.
You know?
Look, I'm gonna grab my bottle and I'm
Yeah.
gonna taste with you. All right, give me
Okay.
just a second.
Yeah, go ahead.
Podcast. I knew I'd forgot something for this podcast.
There you go. Yeah, this is
Yeah.
definitely an event because, like I say, a 7-year-old moonshine. I can't think of anybody that's really done that.
hmm So
And
we have a lot of customers that come just for the barrel cut. They are
hmm,
they are hooked on the barrel cut. they were bourbon drinkers, and now they're hooked on barrel cut. So yeah, like you say, you get kind of a little bit of that rye note, especially when this way.
Yeah. Just really nice sweetness, vanilla sweetness coming through on this.
Yep.
Nice, easy drinker at that proof.
I agree.
Yeah. Of course, you're the man that made it, but yeah.
I actually get some, like I say, I get the caramel notes to it too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think
So
that's part of
coming
when I
from,
get when I talk about that custard, I grab at things that just the impression that it gives me. And so many times I'll say caramel when it's probably more vanilla because that's kind of my weak
hmm
spot in the difference between the two. But for some reason, this one the vanilla was like going, hey, this is much more in the vanilla for me. But yeah, that caramel's there too. And a little bit of a citrus note too, but it's just a really nice, easy drinker. And what's the proof on this? Is 118?
109. This is
109.
109.
Okay, 109.
109. Yep.
Okay, and
109.
and then the last one, which I like to say is very balanced whiskey, is this Total Eclipse Kentucky Straight Bourbon. So is this a brand new version of this whiskey for you?
Yeah, we've been doing this for over a year now, and it's a 4-grain. Actually, probably a year and a half. Might be 2.
Okay.
But it's a 4-grain, so it gives it a unique taste, and you've got a little bit of wheat and rye in it, besides your corn and malt. We have our tasting girls, our staff that does the tastings for people. They all really like this really well, so they're all really like an influence on the customers when they taste it.
Yeah.
And I've got this bottle retails at a lower price. I've got some bottles that retail higher, and I said, "Girls, you're supposed to be pushing the higher stuff, But we like the Total Eclipse bourbon." I said, "Okay, you got to be honest, You got to be honest when you're doing it." So,
well,
yeah.
it helps you know what you need to make more of in the future as
Oh yeah.
well.
Yep, it does. Yep, it
Speaking
does.
speaking of that, where is it available if people are looking for it besides coming to the distillery?
It's available here in Kentucky and available online. We have a couple of distribution centers that can ship just about to any state in the country, and they have it at their locations to ship out. We can ship here in Kentucky, and then it's available in some of the surrounding stores, some in Louisville, some in Paducah, the areas where the Eclipse are kind of hitting at. So, and the bourbon's going out more and more every day. Got an order coming through from a distributor today to go out on the bourbon. So,
Okay.
yep, getting out there and getting known.
There's a mystery on the end of this whiskey. It's like when it starts out for me, it's like butterscotch, brown sugar, a little bit of char notes in there. And then once you get into it, it's like on the finish, there's a surprise. It turns into a flavor, and I cannot figure out what that flavor is that it hits, but it's just like every time I have sipped this, it's like when I get to the end, it evolves all of a sudden after you sit there for a minute. And it's one of those, I guess it's fun when that happens because it's a flavor I have yet to really discover. So I need to figure that out. But it's really interesting
You can always get another bottle or two.
There you go. There you go. I have to keep experimenting and keep experimenting till I can nail what that flavor is. But it's just interesting how a whiskey can sit on your palate for a period of moments and then all of a sudden just shift flavors. It's like I've had very few whiskeys that have done that for me. But when it happens, it's like a curiosity. What is going on in my mouth that suddenly this whiskey is changing character? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I've not really had anybody describe it like that. So you're the first I've heard of that.
Yeah.
But now that you're saying that, I could probably relate to that some. That's one flavor is overpowering the other one after a certain amount of time,
Yeah.
and yeah.
Yeah. It's like the oils are there, and then either some oils are remaining that are keeping a flavor on your palate while the others are dissipating. I don't know what it is, but it's just kind of like taking a turn all of a sudden in the tasting experience, which is great because that adds a
Hmm.
fourth dimension to it. You're used to nosing, palate, finish, and then extra finish on this. So it's a really
Yeah.
interesting whiskey. Um,
Yeah.
well, let's talk about for people who are wanting to come out that direction. You guys are actually tied in with two other distilleries in the area. There's a lot of people who go, "Oh, I want to go to Kentucky and do the Kentucky Bourbon Trail." West Kentucky can seem like it's a bit distant, although I say you're probably just as easily reachable from Nashville as Louisville
Hmm.
in that
Yeah.
respect. But you guys
Yeah.
decided to team up with some other distilleries to create an extra special experience. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. All three of us. It's us, MB Roland, and Old Glory Distilling, which is right across the state line. Um, all good friends. We've all worked together on projects in the past. We've worked together a bunch during COVID, making sanitizer and so forth, supporting each other in that project. But we decided, we're on the craft trail, and we do see a lot of craft people come to finish the tour. Um, but we also decided we're close enough together within 30 minutes of each other that people could do a tour in one day if they wanted to with all three distilleries and wind up with a nice reward at the end of that tour. And not just take it once, but bring family and friends, take it twice, three times once they learned about it and how cool it was. So it's been really, really, really popular um, that people do the state line. And we'll have people, like you say, come out of Nashville just for the purpose of doing the Stateline Whiskey Tour.
Yeah.
Um, if you do the Tennessee Trail and the Craft Bourbon Trail, it's pretty long. It takes a long time to do all those. But you can actually do the state line in a day or a weekend. And we have a lot of people that travel through from other states that we see a lot of Wisconsin traffic, Illinois, Minnesota, Wisconsin. Like I say, we see a lot of those people that come through that may do part of the trail on one of the trips, and the next time they do, they'll finish it on the next trip. You know,
Yeah.
but we're all straight right off of I-24. So you start Tennessee, right across the line. There's MV Rolling. Go north a little bit to like the Cadiz area and get off. And here we are. They're the closest to the interstate. They're right on the interstate. We're about 15 minutes off the interstate. So works out well.
Yeah.
And
I
people
say
love it.
start at MB Rollin, go to Casey next, and then end up at Old Glory because Old Glory now has a restaurant. So
They now have a restaurant. Yeah.
yeah,
Unless it's Friday or Saturday night. We have food trucks and we're open
huh?
till 9 o'clock. So they can do it that way too.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
yeah, it's great to do the restaurant. Or if you start out one in the morning and you go to one for lunch, like Old Glory, and then come on to us. It depends on where you live at, how you're going to run that route. Because we have a lot of people come out of Nashville that want to start here and wind up there because it's closer.
yeah,
And we have some that want to wind up here and then
yeah.
head straight back. So
Well, you got the pond out back and the lawn chairs. So in the summertime, I'd say it'd be a nice place to finish out, kick up your feet for a little while, and
yeah.
have a chat.
Oh yeah, people love to come out and just hang out. And we're pet friendly, and we see a lot of people bring their dogs out, walk around the lake and all that stuff. We have some regulars that come all the time just for that purpose, because
Yeah,
it's a nice place to walk and all that stuff. Stretch your legs and let the animals stretch their legs. And we're pet friendly, kid friendly. We require kids on a leash, and pets run free.
very, very nice.
That's what I always tell everybody when they ask, "Are you kid friendly, pet friendly?" Yeah.
Well, before I let you go, I wanna get one more story from the old days in here because I heard this while I was on my tour, and I love this. I love this story. Casey was building his square stills, but there was a point where he actually had the feds bearing down on him, and he found a very unique hiding space. Can you
Oh
tell
yeah.
that story?
Yeah. So he's actually repairing the still for a customer that he had built it for. It had gotten damaged, and he actually went to their site and was repairing it. And he's actually down in it. This was a big still, and he was down inside of it doing repair work. And they were supposed to hand him stuff when he needed it, and it was working okay. And then all of a sudden, he's asking for something, and nobody's handing him stuff. Nobody's answering. So he sticks his head up out of that still, and he sees them running away, and he immediately just ducks back down in that still, and he actually balls up right in the middle of it, and hoping that they wouldn't see him. And he knew what was probably going to happen. He heard them dumping over the mash barrels and busting them up with axes. He knew that's probably what was fixing to happen to this still. But he took his chances, because if he'd have came out of it, he was going away for a little while. This would have been his third time. And so yeah, he wasn't really making stills then. He was just doing a repair job for a friend, so, but anyway, it wasn't worth getting caught. So he's laying down in there, and they start with those axes, and they start chopping that still up, and they put holes in the sides of it where it won't hold and all that stuff. And he just stays in there, and he stays down there till dark and for a pretty good while before he ever crawls out of it and runs off. But thing about it he said, I had a little repair job. Now I got a big repair job. But he didn't get caught. So nobody got caught on
Nice.
that one. Yeah.
Otherwise, it'd be a
So,
very different story, probably, in terms of
oh,
his
yeah.
having to go back to
Yeah.
prison again. Um,
Yeah.
Man, yeah,
Yeah.
it's fun to hear these old stories, and in a way, you kind of wish that he could have documented all of that stuff for us for the future. But we get little bits of
Oh,
stories
yeah.
from you.
Yeah. I've had, since I've put in the distillery, some of Casey's daughters here. I've had 3 of them here that come to see how this place was. They'd heard about it and knew I had done it. And they tell me, as a kid, when he was doing this stuff, that they got in trouble if they even mentioned what he was doing. Because, if the kid starts talking about, granddad's making a still or dad's making a still, then somebody's going to get in trouble.
Yeah.
But one of them was telling me about the fact that he built one in the attic of the house once, and had to take off the gable end of the house to get it out. But he built it in the attic so it would be
Oh,
hidden.
wow.
So yeah, that was kind of a different workspace there, I would imagine,
Yeah.
trying to do one in the attic. There've been a lot of trips up and down, but you had to be
I
creative. It's just like when they had barrels when they tried to age product and stuff. A lot of them buried their barrels in the ground. Of course, it's not going to,
breathe.
get a lot of heat change to work right, but they
Yeah.
did anyway. So yeah,
It's kind of like
yeah,
wrapping it in cellophane. They've done those
yeah,
experiments before and said, "Oh, it doesn't really age
yeah,
quite the same way that way."
yeah.
Yeah.
Prior to our rick houses, we've aged in these containers that we have here, and believe it or not, they age product really well because they get really hot in the summertime and really cold in the wintertime. So there's a lot of heat changing back and forth, at times of the year on that product and so forth. So it does a really great job. You have to kind of watch. You'll have a big loss though. They get too hot,
Mm,
and too many leaks. So,
yeah.
but yeah,
So how do people find out
yeah,
more information about Casey Jones? You on social media and website?
yeah. We're on social media. We have website CaseyJonesDistillery.com, Instagram. We're on the Craft Bourbon Trail. We're on the Stateline Whiskey Tour. We have distribution in Kentucky, Texas, California, Arizona, Atlanta, Tennessee, Michigan, Illinois, Wisconsin, New York, New Jersey, and 3 provinces in Canada right now. And we
Very
just
nice.
got back from world market, and are fixing to be in Germany and some other places. So that's kind of going to be neat, A little Casey Jones over in Germany.
Very nice. Very nice.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right. Well,
Yeah.
thank you, Casey. I mean, AJ, I got Casey on the mind. AJ, I
Yeah.
really
Well,
appreciate you.
Casey is my middle name. Now,
Well, there we
I'm
go.
Arlen
Okay.
Casey Jones. Casey is my middle name. So before you go,
Yes,
this pack, you got that pack?
I did get that. That is great packaging, by the way. And
Oh, this is
I got my glasses.
right.
I-
Free glasses, pair of free glasses with the bourbon and moonshine. So, yeah, those are amazingly selling really fast and so
Very
forth.
nice.
And we actually sent some of these to out in California. They wanted some of the product out there, so
Oh, very
they're not
nice.
even in the path of the Eclipse, I don't think. So
They'll get it sooner or later, somewhere
they'll
along
get
the
it sooner
line.
or later.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. I had to wait a whole lifetime before I saw an eclipse,
yeah.
but I finally got
Drew,
one
I
in
really
2017.
appreciate you. I really appreciate you taking the time to call in and this chat. I know we chatted before, but this is a great conversation.
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
thank you,
enjoyed
thank
it.
you. It's I want you guys to get recognition because a lot of, like I say, a lot of people will look at the Bourbon Trail and they may not think of going out to West Kentucky because it looks like it's a distance away, and it's like, no, look, you can go to all the big distilleries in Kentucky, but you got to go to some of the smaller ones as well and see what they're doing out there because you guys are where all of this fun innovation comes from, and doing 7-year
Yep.
old moonshines and things
Yep.
like that.
hmm
That's it's fantastic. So I'm always rooting
You
for
know
you
who
guys.
you know who Fred Minnick is, right?
Yeah.
So Fred got a hold of one of our moonshines, aged moonshines, um, and he actually said it was one of the best aged moonshines he'd ever tasted. So
I
that was kind of neat too. Yeah, it was
absolutely.
very neat.
I wish I
Yeah,
had his palate, but I will say from my own drinking standpoint, that was very enjoyable. And thank you for the
yeah,
bottle because I will enjoy
yeah,
that one for sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, thank
Awesome.
you,
Good
AJ.
deal.
I really appreciate it, and wish you all the best of luck and enjoy the eclipse.
Yep, sure will. So to the Eclipse, right?
To the eclipse. Cheers.
Cheers.